Good evening. Welcome back to Deep Images, and we're going to be continuing our series on crime films. With me tonight is my co-host this evening is Rhiannon Clark, and I'm Henry Covert, and we're going to cover a film each, and yeah, let's get into it. So, uh, the first one that we've got, I have one that I want to cover called Straight Time from 1978. And this one was directed by Yulu Grosbard, who, to be honest, really, unlike a lot of people in this movie, he has like really almost zero pedigree. He did a lot of other movies, some of which I've already heard of. They were all critical and financial failures and have been mostly forgotten. So this was really kind of his masterpiece. He was like a kind of a journeyman Hollywood director. So anybody could have directed this, but he got the luck of the draw because he did a great job. So this is with Dustin Hoffman. It's my personal favorite Dustin Hoffman role, and that's saying a lot because he's usually back then pretty awesome. It's based on a novel called No Beast So Fierce by Edward Bunker. So Edward Bunker was a real life convict. He spent most of his youth and into his, I guess, 30s, late 30s, maybe in prison. And he got to writing in prison. In 1973, while he was in prison, they published No Beast So Fierce, which was basically about his life as a thief, a burglar. Occasionally, he was a drug dealer. He didn't do any violent crime. Um, but he was just a perpetual offender or whatever. Um, and that became a bestseller.
So so it's based on a true story. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it is a true story. And the guy who wrote it is
Right.
also he's got a lot of other connections with other stuff too. Some of which we talked about with Marksman. It even crosses over with another movie we just covered on here. So we'll get to that. It's kind of wild. With some of that I didn't know until he told me that last episode. So we're all learning. Um,
Cool.
so
Quite
Bunker,
cool. I love it.
yeah, Bunker was like he got out of prison for good in 75. One of his cellmates, this will come up later, one of his cellmates was Danny Trejo, who had also been a lifetime criminal. And so, those who are familiar with Danny Trejo may know how this turned out. Obviously, he's super, super famous now as an actor. But, he's about 80 now. So, but he still looks incredible. But, he's spent most of his youth in jail, unfortunately. Um, but anyway, Bunker, he wrote this book and he got out of prison. And as soon as the book was published, practically, Dustin Hoffman optioned the rights for it. And then there was some legal, by the time Bunker got out of prison and they started talking about getting it rolling, there was some kind of legal snafu between the studio that was going to do it and between Dustin Hoffman. So they got that settled. That took a little while because he really wanted to play this part. He really loved the book. And so Bunker was a consultant on it. And Bunker had wanted to be not only a writer, but also an actor if he could be. And so he has a small but key role in the film also. So yes, it's got his stamp of approval. Uh, so let me talk a little bit about the plot, and then I'm going to talk about some of the incredible people involved with this, and some of the tie-ins and everything. So uh, basically Hoffman plays Max Dimbo. So Dimbo's like the real life Edward Bunker, in and out of jail since he was like 12, 10 or 12. And he had well, he had a history of violence. No, he didn't have a history of violence. He had a history of crime though.
Callback.
Yes, right, another one. And Dimbo, when he gets out of prison, which is where we start the story with, he basically just he wants to go straight. He doesn't really know how, but he's determined to try to do it. uh a lot of these kind of movies, um for instance, another one that we covered recently under crime was A Better Tomorrow. In those movies, these guys are like, we're going straight, permanent, that's it, no matter what. And they don't only start getting violent again when somebody starts attacking their family or them, or they have no other choice. They've got to do it, and the people they're killing are criminals too, who want to suck them back in. So I'd like to say that Max Dimbo is as strong-willed a character as John Woo's characters, but he's not. Uh, his determination to stay straight doesn't last long, but what they put him through, the system puts him through, you kind of almost don't blame him. He has a parole officer played by Emmett Walsh, who, has made a career of playing just extremely irritatingly disgusting people. For instance, Blood Simple, and a couple others. Blood Simple in this one are two of his worst. I mean, good acting, worst characters. He also played Harrison Ford's boss in Blade Runner, and he's been in a million other movies and TV shows. But those are some key ones that I know him from. But so his character Earl Frank is this just asshole. He basically torments his people that are on parole. He wants to like control every aspect of their life. He wants to make sure that they dot the line on everything. Like he wants to know like where they sleep, what they eat, if they're getting a job, if they're doing this, if they're who they're talking to. And you don't see a whole lot of him dealing with the other inmates. So I mean, I get the feeling he does this to everyone, but he definitely seems to have a special animus against Max. Just sadistic. And Max is very meek, and of course, I mean, he's meek with him. And so this movie's interesting because when you enter the story, you think, well, this is a good role for Dustin Hoffman. He's trying to go straight. He's mellow. He's earnest, but you will see his edge in this movie like you've never seen in any movie before since, in my opinion, from him. He kind of hits the spectrum. I don't know why he didn't get an Oscar for this, but you know how things go. So this parole officer and kind of do this dance for a while, and he goes to see an old friend played by Gary Busey. It's one of his early roles, actually. Right, this was either right after or right before he did the Buddy Holly story, which that was kind of what made him a star. Though he had been acting
I
for
really like him.
yeah, he'd been acting for
I
many
really like
years
him.
before that. He started in biker movies, just like Adam Rourke and William Smith did in the late '60s, and because he's got that kind of tough, burly whatever. But yeah, he's good in this. So his friend Willie, there's a lot of people who got early starts in this movie. He was one. Kathy Bates plays his wife. So if anyone who's watched
Love
Kathy
her.
Bates's material from Misery onward, since she's become famous, won't recognize her in this movie. And that's not an insult. It's not an insult to her later appearance, but it's definitely a compliment. I mean, she's like, wow. She's very natural. Her hair's
Versatile.
She's very young, and she's not overweight, but she is very voluptuous. And that's hard not to notice. But she's just a humble lady playing humble lady. Doesn't look like she has much makeup. So yeah, I didn't know it was her the first time I watched it until the end. But now I kind of see it in her face. But um, anyway, she's hoping Willie Gary Busey, her husband, has gone straight, and he seemingly has. He's gone the same path. He's been out of prison longer than Max. He's trying to stay on the up and up, or so she thinks. So the seductive nature of this criminal world is kind of heavy pull on these people apparently. So um, Max goes to them, hangs out, deals with the parole officer, and he gets a place to stay. Um, and then at one evening, he's out, and I think it's actually the first evening he's out. He doesn't go to the halfway house just before he gets a place. He's supposed to go to the halfway house, so he goes to the hotel. And he has a little extra money for whatever he did in prison that earned him a little bit of extra money, and so the parole officer flips out on him the first time. And this is mild flip out compared to later flip outs. And he's like, okay, this is a violation. You're supposed to go to the halfway house. And he's like, well, I wanted to walk out about in the world. I'm free. I'm free now. And this isn't the kind of guy you talk to about your feelings or your, you know, he's like a rock, and
A wall.
yes. And so he says, okay, well, basically, like he uses that as leverage. Like, okay, well, yeah, I'll let it go, but you need to get a job by the end of the week, and you better go to the halfway house before then, and then you better get a place as soon as you get a job. And he's like, okay. So he gets a place, and pretty quick, and then he goes to interview for a job. Well, first he goes to the employment agency to get a job, and the woman who works at the employment agency is played by Teresa Russell. It's one of her early roles, and she's great in this. And she, it's kind of okay with her job. It's just kind of mundane. She just helps place people at different employment, and they talk. And finally, he kind of flirts with her a little bit, and he's like, well, if I get my first check, she finds him a job, and he's like, I'm gonna get my first check, and I take you to dinner, and etc. So, there's she's like, okay. Um, so along the way to those two spending some time together, um, him and Willie hang out at his new place, and Willie starts he's shooting heroin. I mean, they don't show him shoot heroin, but he's got a match, and he's not using it to smoke weed though. He's got a spoon. I thought it was smoking weed when I
Mm.
saw it in the old days, but I watched it again yesterday. I'm like, oh no, he's getting ready to shoot up. And
Mm.
and Max is like, does your wife know? And he's like, no, no, and she's always suspicious though. So he's like, man, if you drop any of this here, I'm screwed. You know. And
Mm.
so he's like, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. So Willie's one of these guys who's always screwing up and badly, knows he's screwing up, but then apologizes and expects you to forgive him. That
Well,
only
it's
goes,
easy to screw up when you're doing heroin. It's easy to screw up.
yeah,
It's
he
fair.
takes it a little. He finds out that that's mainly not a good idea toward the end of the movie
Yeah.
to be that way, to always expect your friends to forgive you for screwing them up. Because apparently Willie has screwed him up in the past. Uh, and Max kind of has seemingly like a code, basically. He just like he's trying to get along, and then until he can no longer get along, then he's in it for himself. And if you're in with him, it's cool. But if you screw him over, his wrath will be shown, and you'll be like, whoa, is this really Dustin Hoffman? um so because he's been hardened by the system. So
Hmm.
after he gets this stuff
The
rolling,
claws come out.
the
The
claws come
claws come
out.
out.
Yeah.
Mm.
And he has a date with Teresa Russell, and she ends up having to pay for it, which I kind of saw that coming. He did have a little cash, but he feels bad about it, and he's very attracted to her, but they don't like get it on or anything, not for a while. And um so then he has a run in with the parole officer, and this is where things take a complete turn. The guy comes to him. He comes to his house to check up on him. He's asking about his job, and of course, he's pretending to be all pleased. Oh, that's great, Max. You got a job, and you got a house, and uh, I think he sees Teresa Russell's. What's her character? It's going to drive me crazy if I just keep calling her Teresa Russell, because I know most of these characters. Um, her character's
I'm
name.
the same. I have my notebook too.
Yeah, yeah, me too. And so Jenny, so yeah, so he Jenny's number, he's got Jenny's number, and I think the Earl Frank, the parole officer, says something like, "Oh, what's this about?" He's like, no, he doesn't the number. He's like, "Where'd you get the job?" And he said, "An employment agency from this nice lady." And he's like, "Oh, and he's kind of like, you going out with a lady?" And of course, that's none of his business. But he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, not, I mean, not really. And he's like, you got to be careful who you hang around with, Max. Like that's the extent of the control he has over this guy.
Mm.
And So then he finds some residue of the drug taking that Willie did in Max's place. It's like some matches, and I don't know if he I don't know which kind of drug he thinks it is, and it doesn't really matter, because with Max's record, he can't be offending at all in any kind of illegal drugs, even if it's weed. So um, he explains it, and he says we're going to have to drive to the station. He's like, well, I have to be somewhere in a couple hours, which is going to be a second date with Jenny. And the guy's like, no. And he starts driving him around, and he's like, just okay, I'm going to give you a break, man. Just tell me who it is. Tell me who. I believe you. You didn't do any drugs in your house. Who did? And he's like, I can't tell you that. And he won't.
Because
He's
he
not
wants to be a friend.
right. He's not a narc. Of course, he learned that in
Mm.
prison too. And so, well, the guy just he handcuffs him. He handcuffs him to his chair in his bed. I mean, his own house. And then he gets them to take him down to the station and tells him that he's going to be tested, and ostensibly very quickly, a mere formality. Well, Max stays in jail a week. He goes through the
Hmm.
entire reprocessing and everything. It's like back to square one before there's we're even a half hour into the movie. He's already back in the system. So then when the guy comes to him, the parole officer comes to him, he's like, yeah, you tested clean, we're going to go ahead and let you out. And he's like, where were you? Why did it take you a week? And he's like, hey,
Yeah.
man, I was busy. Calm down. You don't get mad at me. I tell you what to do. And it's,
Playing the victim all of a sudden.
it's
Yeah.
very toxic. And
Hmm.
so he lets him out. And then he does see Jenny again. Um, and basically, the guy shakes him down again. Uh, and this time around, he still won't tell him who did the drugs. He won't do any of that stuff. And he's talking a lot of smack to him. They're driving in the car down the highway and a busy freeway rather. And he just Dustin kind of has had it. And he grabs the wheel and they go flying off into the dirt, the ravine, the canyon, back onto the highway. He's like hitting the guy with his elbow as hard as he can in his face. And he's finally letting out that rage. And
Hmm.
finally he stops. And the guy's like, you're ruined. You're done. You're finished. And Max is like, you let me rot there for a week, motherfucker. I mean, and
Hmm.
he takes his handcuffs and he handcuffs the parole officer to this fence on this highway in the middle of, this nowhere, no way to get back. And then he pulls his
Yeah, it's a
pants all the
memorable
way.
scene.
Yes, he pulls his pants all the way down. Uh,
Yeah.
and all these people are calling him Fatso and stuff, and he's holding his penis, trying to, probably doesn't have much to hold, but
Yeah.
so he's like, that's it. And so there's never any more, you don't see this character ever again. You just kind of know that however he got freed, then yes, obviously Max is now a fugitive. And Max doesn't even try to return to his job or do anything otherwise, you know. But he does go to Jenny, and he finally ends up telling her, I'm on the run, I'm a fugitive, what happened, and she's willing to stick with him. She's really digging him. They still haven't even had sex. I don't even know if they've kissed yet, but there's a vibe there, and she's like,
They
and
have chemistry.
they have chemistry, and you kind of get the feeling that
Hmm.
she mentions an ex-boyfriend when he first meets her. You kind of get the feeling maybe she's been with like the bad boys before, and all that stuff. Uh
Hmm.
so they have a little romance, but along the side, he's been kind of talking to some people from the past, including Willie, and he's been talking to just a few people at clubs, and he's telling me straight, but then at this point, he's just like going to go ahead and start exploiting the fact he has these connections. And so he just starts going to like the pool halls, and he wants guns from this one guy who sells him gun is going to sell
Hmm.
him guns. uh and where all this finally heads is he's staying with Jenny. She's basically keeping him on the lam. No sign of the law yet for quite a while. um and she Max, Max has a buddy, and his buddy's name is Jerry Shue, and this is played by the great Harry Dean Stanton, who, I didn't know how old Harry Dean Stanton was until like the last 15 years or so, just being a Twin Peaks fanatic. But he was already 52 when he did this movie in 1978, and of course he died at 91 a few years ago. So he was
Wow.
born in 1925, and but he looks great for 52. This is around the same time he was in The Rose, also great, and he was great in that movie. But these are before he did Alien in Paris, Texas, and became kind of well known.
Oh yeah.
Year before he did Alien, and so this is a cool guy. He's been on the streets. He's really cool. He's got the hip leather jacket. He's got kind of the 70s
Yeah.
haircut, and
Hmm.
they're hanging out, and they talk about doing some jobs together. uh First thing Dustin does when he gets his gun is he holds up a liquor store or something, gets some petty cash, and that's when you start to see kind of other side of him. And he's nervous. He's very nervous, but he's also very like cold. And he doesn't. It's not like he doesn't want to shoot or kill anybody. That's the thing. He doesn't want anyone to get killed. But you know, he also doesn't want anything getting in his way, um
Yeah.
it's a hard tightrope, I guess, to travel. So
He's not a walkover now. Definitely
yeah.
not a walkover. Mm. Not after like handcuffing his parole officer to the gate, I think, or to the fence. That was the end of his pushover tendencies.
Right. He'd finally had enough. It didn't take long, but but the guy did put him through a lot for just a couple of weeks out of prison. Um,
Fair enough.
and I'm sure his character is internalizing that, well, okay, I guess I'm just destined to be a criminal. So that's why
Yeah.
he begins aggressively trying to get jobs again, and robberies, heists, whatever. And so after he gets some petty cash and he does a few things, him and Jerry, they hook up with this job with this one guy, and they case out this place. And this guy's supposed to meet him there, and I can't remember if the guy is supposed to help them or be the. They said late at night. It's going to be like a heist, kind of like in Heat, not or Thief, not that level of. Not that level of high tech. I mean, it's only gonna be three guys with basic equipment, but they're just gonna try to break into somewhere at night and get some money. Um,
Because it's the 70s, isn't it?
yeah, 78, yeah. And
Okay.
the guy doesn't do what Dustin asked him to, and he's like, okay, it's off, and when the goodbyes, they say we can't do it, and Dustin's like, you fucked up, man, you fucked up,
Yeah.
man. And Jerry's like, come on, let's go. He's like, no, and he keeps turning around telling that guy, he's like, you screwed me over, like, I'm like, that's it, you better watch out, and so you realize Max has compulsive behavior problems, I mean, and he's hyper vigilant. Being in prison, that'll probably make you hyper vigilant.
Yeah.
and
Indeed.
but he's got a temper, but he tries to control it, but he has no patience with people because he hasn't learned how to transact in society and do all these fake things we all have to do to get along. To him, it's like, oh, somebody screwed me over. Okay, that's all right. Somebody screwed me over again. Okay, well, that's it. Um, and Jerry comes.
Criminal mind. He's got a criminal
Yeah,
mind.
yes, he does. And but he's not like a brilliant mastermind. I mean, he knows how to
Yeah.
get in and out. But he's been arrested so many times, so he's not like the characters in Heat. He's not like
He's in fight, flight, or freeze mode,
all
basically.
the time. Yeah, what tension and
Yeah.
anxiety. I mean, his only
Yeah.
relief is being with Jenny, and it's the only time you see his gentle side anymore. Uh, but he's still stern with her, and he's like, if you can't take this, you can leave or I'll leave, and she's like, I'll tell you when I can't take anymore. But for now, we're together. And so they have kind of
Aw.
an understanding, because he was afraid she was going to not have a relationship with him when she found out he was a fugitive. But contrary, like I said, he moves in, and then finally they have a big lovemaking scene, not super graphic, but it's very tender and sweet. But you know,
Yeah.
all good things. So
Nothing like history of violence.
no, nothing like that. No shadow
No,
sex in this
no,
one. So
no, no. Yeah.
that's a shout out to
Yeah.
our another episode we did. Um, yeah, so he takes the new job with Jerry, and he tells Jenny not to worry. He's just going to do it, and she's like, "How long are you going to do this?" He's like, "If I get enough, I won't do it anymore. We'll split, maybe you and me, whatever." So it is the same kind of cycle, that you do see in these later kind of movies like Thief and Heat. So I think Michael Mann was probably a big fan of this movie. Actually, no, he definitely was. That was in my notes too. So we covered Michael Mann on this channel. Bill Mulligan covered Manhunter, and also Mark Baranowski covered Heat. Not only did he cover Heat, but he covered Miami Vice the movie and Miami Vice the TV show. That's going to be an extra
Good
special,
man.
super deluxe episode homage to Michael Mann. So we just have now in the future we'll cover Thief sometime on this channel, but we've covered a lot of his masterpieces, but his career was starting then, and he was always into crime, doing crime stuff. And yeah, this actually, he had an interview, I think in 2019 with Sight and Sound magazine, and they asked Michael Mann, what is your personal top 10 favorite movies of all time? And high on the list, they didn't say what number, was Straight Time. So it's obviously an influence because he did Thief like 2 or 3 years after Straight Time, and there's a lot of a lot of similarities. I'm not saying he ripped it off. I think he did. I know he put in the research, just like they put in the research, with Edward Bunker's consulting and everything. Edward Bunker just plays this.
Influence. It's okay to be
Oh yeah,
influenced
no,
by
no,
other
yeah.
movies. Yeah.
It's just interesting because, to be honest, until I read that yesterday, I didn't think of the timeline. It hadn't really occurred to me that, oh wow, there was Straight Time, and there's like 3 years later there's Heat, and the characters have been through the same shit. So him and Jerry have a very simple one. It's just a really simple one. It's a bank job, and
Oh yeah.
uh, they go through the bank job, and Dustin doesn't want to leave when the time's time to leave, and he finally splits. And on his way out, he's grabbing cash and shit, and he's counting every single dollar. So I'm assuming this guy grew up. I haven't researched Edward Bunker, but just based on the photos I've seen and what little I know about his teen years, and this character is that he grew up in wretched poverty. I'm assuming. So and he's got this compulsive behavior. So that's a combination. So he wants every dollar. He doesn't just want to steal enough to get by. He wants every single thing he can possibly get away with, up to the edge of being caught. He's willing to risk it, and sadly, he's willing to risk the other guys too. He doesn't mean to, but he can't really. He's getting out of control, and he's not really considering. Jerry's trying to keep him online. Now they've known each other for decades, so Jerry kind of is the only person really who can make him like chill out. He's like he gives him like the tough love. Jenny gives him the love, but Jenny's not in the crime. So, but Jerry's like, come on, man.
Jenny's not a man.
Yeah,
not a man in a criminal world.
Exactly. And Jerry's, he talks kind of like, a guy in his, early 50s and late 70s. He's kind of like a aging hippie or beatnik kind of, ex-con. And he's like, come on, man, this is bullshit, and you got to do it.
Yeah.
And so they get together, and, they don't get much out of it, but another job comes their way. And this time he decides he's going to case a jewelry store, and he takes Jenny there, and she's an unwitting like accomplice to this. She doesn't know he's casing the jewelry store. She thinks with all this money he just recently got, he's going to buy her these wonderful necklaces, and he's like, wouldn't you like this? And she's like, this is really too fancy for me. I don't need this, Max. I'm a simple person, And when I first saw it, I was kind of like, yeah, why is he trying to impress her like this? But then I realized he's actually using that to case the place. And he goes toward the back at one point, and the guy's like, sir. He's like, I'm trying to find your bathroom, man. And they ask the prices of a few of these things, and like he's like, that one's $48,000, that one's $120,000, and just, I don't know. I never have understood the jewelry market, but so
$10,000.
Right, and she's uncomfortable, and so he's got what he needs. He's looked at all the cases, he's looked at what's in them, and he's kind of mentally added up and he's asked these questions. So he kind of has a ballpark of how much he could get, and it's a lot of money, obviously, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe $1 million. So he tells Jerry, and Jerry's like, let's do it, man. But when I say go, you got to go. He's like, we're gonna do 3 minutes. He's like, I know had the time on this alarm for this neighborhood. They both know the neighborhood, and they kind of talk it over, and they make it clear seemingly to each other that, okay, when we have 3 minutes, the alarm's going to go off, and then we got, another couple of minutes tops, to get out of there. And so, or maybe it might be the alarm goes off like earlier. I forgot exactly. I know they don't have more than,
it's tense.
From the time
I remember it being tense.
Yes, it's time, and from the time they begin doing the robbery to the time they're supposed to be done and out, it's not going to be more than 4 minutes total. Because they get a getaway driver. And this is what pisses off Jerry. Jerry had a getaway driver, and the guy had a conflict, so he's lining up another one or trying to talk him into doing it after all. And Max is impatient. he's compulsive, and he says to Willie, Gary Busey, he's like, come on, man, will you do this? And Willie, of course, like I said earlier, doesn't really seem, unlike Max in the beginning, doesn't really seem to care about, you think he does. He's not compulsive like Max or self-destructive. He's just kind of, I mean, I hate to put it this way, he's kind of an idiot. He's kind of like just a guy who's like, whatever, I'd like to have a wife and kid and a family, but hey, man, if I want to shoot smack or be a getaway drive, he's not calculated or smart like Max and Jerry are. So he is the natural getaway driver. He's just the getaway driver. And so if they're not back out in 5 minutes, allegedly they're to leave, but they don't instruct him to leave them behind. But and of course, Willie's been Max's friend for, like I said, many years. Jerry doesn't like Willie. Jerry doesn't like the fact that he changed the plan on him and didn't tell him. And he's like, "You're getting out of control, man. You're getting out of control. You're doing all the wrong shit." And so the real big set piece of the movie is the robbery, kind of like in Heat, when it was like the robbery and the shootout. This one isn't on that scale, but it's still very powerful because they put on goggles, they put on these protective gloves, and then they have some weapons with them. Jerry's got a shotgun, Dustin's got I guess a 9mm or something, or a pistol. And
they're robbing professionally.
They are, and they're doing it in broad daylight. Yes, and in public. They're doing the exact opposite of what a lot of people would do. That we've been talking about, the kind of people. And that's why the thing in Heat goes wrong. I mean, that's a bank robbery, which they don't usually do. They usually do those heists, but when they do the bank robbery, they've got it planned down to the millisecond. And the only thing that fucks them up is somebody betrays them. That's the only thing. And so that's why when the cops all show up, De Niro's, again, grew up in prison. He just starts using the machine gun, killing all the cops. He didn't intend to do that, but so this is on a much smaller scale, but it's the ferocity of it on the smaller scale. He had got a hammers to break this glass, and Max just like banging him, and it is really loud and really aggressive and just totally. I didn't expect it. He's just hitting him really fast. There's glass going everywhere. It's just, he smashes all of them. Jerry smashes a few. And so of course Max starts getting everything he get. So at first he's going for the big things, he's already seen, they showed him before, but then he's getting petty, he's trying to grab every little thing. He's no. And he starts going through the glass. He says, damn glass. And so the time runs out. Jerry's like, let's go, man. And he's like, no. There's we can get some more. We got the time, and it's just, it's like, and he even tries to like grab, like some woman gets in his way and he like grabs her ring off her hand and knocks this other guy out because he's sick, this is like a sickness, and so they split and there's no car. So
no getaway car.
No getaway cars. They hoof it. Now, amazingly, they still almost make it. They get through these back neighborhoods running with these sacks full of jewelry, and they each have firearms. And unfortunately, a cop does see them. Max has already jumped over the fence. He's a little younger and sprier. Jerry's about to do it, but the cop is coming, and Jerry's, obviously he has no compunction against killing a police officer if he has to. And so he tries to, and unfortunately doesn't kill the guy. The guy shoots him and he does die. He falls off the fence. He falls over the fence, and, the other guy tries to crawl up after being wounded, and, Max shoots at him, and he, but we find out later he was critically injured, but we don't know what happened to him. It's not really important, but in a way it is, because when it's found out, the same kind of reaction comes as in Heat when those people's significant others find out that they were on this public thing. It's a total precursor to that kind of thing. And so Jerry dies, and Max goes to Jenny's work, and he's like, we're leaving. I mean, he's like really tripping. He like gets rid of the case, gets rid of the gun, and he finds some piece of clothing or something, and or some like bedspread, something he finds in the alleyway, and he wraps all the jewelry in it real tight. So he's walking around this little thing like a pouch. I mean, you think he's gonna have like little thing slung over his shoulder like a hobo, and it's got all these hundreds of thousands worth of jewelry in it. And he's like, "We got to go, Jenny. We got to go now." And she's like, "Okay,
Yeah.
I'll be back." And says something, and she doesn't know he mean. I don't think she knows he means for good. Um, but it is. It's like that do or die, and she goes with him. And it's very tense. And he says, "I gotta drop off one place to get some money, and then we'll be free." Again, this exactly happens in Heat, as everyone who's seen that movie knows. So very similar arc here. Um, and in this case, in Heat, De Niro's like, "Okay, I'm with my woman. I'm getting out of the life. I made it out of the bank robbery, even though my buddies didn't. And I'm going to take this beautiful woman and split. But first, I've got to get revenge on the guy who betrayed us, who really screwed us over." And that's the thing, is he shouldn't have done that. The whole time you're watching Heat, you're like, "Don't go back, Neil. Don't go back." Um,
He got evil greedy.
but in this case,
Revenge greedy.
yeah. But in this case, it's not just revenge; it's because it was his good friend that just betrayed him.
Okay, yeah.
In that case, it was just a guy who totally screwed up, you know, uh, Neil, and got his friends killed. In this one, it's like he got Jerry killed, but he's the guy's pitiful. He's really pitiful. The Willie character. He's just like doesn't have a clue what's going on. He's just, I don't know if he's high all the time or what, but he's like, I got
He's
scared.
lost.
I got scared. Like at
He's
first
lost.
he doesn't even know what happened, like what he did. And he's like, "You weren't there, man." And this is when Max is elevating, and he pulls out a gun, he kind of like waves it around, and then he kind of puts it back, and the guy's like begging him, and he's like, "Okay, okay, you did it. You did what we had to do." And okay, that's cool, man. That's cool. We're friends. Let me give you a hug. And he gives him a hug and blows his guts out. And when Willie doesn't just fall, you don't see him shoot. You don't see him shoot Willie again in the fire, but you see Dustin holding the gun, and he shoots him like two or three more times because he's just absolutely enraged. And he
Yeah.
mentions, see, when he mentions Jerry to the guy, then it like starts to dawn on Willie that for the first time maybe in his life, oh, I got a cool guy killed because I was an idiot. But it's too late. It's like Dustin's not gonna forgive him. So
Yeah.
he gets back with Jenny. They roar off, and that's the end. No, that's not the end, because on the radio they hear about the robbery, and she figures it out pretty quick, and she's like, "Let me go. Let me pull over. I got to go." And I thought she was going to just run away into the middle of nowhere, but she actually has to throw up and then gets back in the
Yeah.
car. But
Too much.
from that moment though, she's pretending to go along with him. I mean, I think she is planning to leave him when they get to a place, with like a telephone and food and a bathroom and stuff like that. And so when they get to such a place like a diner, they go and they eat a little bit, and it's basically like, that's it, and so
Yeah.
he's cold. He's cold about it. He's like, "I'm gonna go,"
Yeah.
and she's like, "Will you call me?" And he doesn't say a word, man. He just walks away, and you never know what happens to him, but there is the implication as he's driving away. They give you a spoiler. This is a spoiler heavy show, folks. I didn't mean to go through the whole movie, but it's also exciting. I can't leave anything out. But they show this incredible these shots of him, his mug shots. So they show a current mug shot of him, which was the most recent one, and from when he went to jail this last time and got out at the beginning of the movie. And then they show one from a few years earlier, and these are all Dustin Hoffman pre the age of CGI and AI and Photoshop. They've made it to look like it's young Dustin Hoffman in a lineup, and they show him when he's a bit younger, and then they show the one when he's 12 years old, which they referred to earlier. And it's just tragic.
Mhm.
So yeah, this is one of my favorite crime movies, one of my favorite movies, and um, it had a lot of talent and things associated with it. I'll go through just a bit and then I'll be wrapped up. So the main guy who wrote this film, based on Eddie Bunker's novel, was Alvin Sargent. So he was like a Hollywood writer who's written. It's amazing. I knew he had written or co-written a lot of stuff, and I was trying to think what else has he written. And man, this is weird because he's kind of has a range. So before Straight Time, he did Paper Moon, which at the time was a huge hit with Ryan O'Neal and Tatum O'Neal, which just came out on Criterion on a Blu-ray. This movie that I saw when I was a kid on TV with this hilarious title, "The Effect of Gamma Rays on Man in the Moon Marigolds," which is like a mother-daughter kind of
Great
drama.
title.
Yeah, that. And then he did Julia, which was also a big movie with not Lynn Grave, Vanessa Redgrave at the time. I think she won an Oscar. And then um, shortly after Straight Time, he did. Now these are movies he wrote by himself, by the way. He didn't write them with any co-writers like with Straight Time. These are movies he wrote all by himself. He wrote Ordinary
Wow,
People, and that won a bunch of Oscars. And then
talented.
he didn't do a whole lot for many years, just some very minor projects and some co-writing, script doctoring. But the next thing he got involved with was Spider-Man, and he was one of the writers on Spider-Man, the first movie. And then he completely wrote the second one by himself, which is probably why it's the best one.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
you know,
Nice.
and he also co-wrote the third one with Sam Raimi. And then he started to work on the first reboot, and then it was just like he wasn't the final scriptwriter. He's probably like, I'm done with this. Uh, but then he died a few years later. I mean, I hate the Amazing Spider-Man with Andrew Garfield as his last writing credit, but oh well, that's okay. Um, he didn't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, so great writer. Jeffrey Boehm co-wrote it with him, and Jeffrey Boehm had a bit more of a bit less, a bit more mainstream and less interesting career than any of these other people I've mentioned. But he did do some key works as far as high quality, and he really the first one was the one he did, which was The Dead Zone. So Boehm, has some I forgot. I've read Cronenberg on Cronenberg a few times, but I've still forgotten. Stephen King wrote the script for the screenplay for Dead Zone. Now, Stephen King, who complains about everyone ruining his movies in their adaptations, according to Cronenberg, he ruined his own book because he decided to write the screenplay from the point of view of the Castle Rock killer and make it an all-out blood and guts movie. Which, I mean, that element is in his book, but that's not really the book's really about Johnny. And ultimately, Cronenberg is like, it's a love story. It's about Johnny and Sarah, and the guy's like, and does he, can he change history? If he has precognition. And King didn't get it. His own idea, he didn't get it because he thought he needed to modify things to be in Hollywood, to kind of sell out. Now, I don't know all his experiences after that. I mean, it's ironic that he wrote the screenplay to Creepshow for Romero just like a year earlier, and totally just did it wild.
Are you saying Cronenberg made his book better by making the movie better? Cronenberg
Oh, he
make
made
it
it.
better?
Well, in my opinion, he made it infinitely better.
Yeah.
I can't even. I've read
Cool.
the book, and it's good. I mean, the premise is good, but Cronenberg cut out a lot of. It wasn't so much his book; it's his screenplay. I mean, his screenplay was unusable, and of course that enraged King. And this is before this King was already a millionaire, but he wasn't like he is now. I mean, if somebody did this to him now, he'd probably get the guy canceled. He has a lot of power now. But this is when he just become big, and probably had a little bit more of a brain and a heart than he does now. And so Cronenberg got Boehm to rewrite it, and Boehm like made it what it is. And to me a beautiful movie. So then after Boehm did Dead Zone, he co-wrote some big movies. He co-wrote the Lost Boys, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, part of Lethal Weapon 3, Witches of Eastwick. The only really creative thing he did after to my taste, no offense to Lost Boys fans, which I'm not one, or Indiana Jones
I
fans,
don't
which
mind it.
yeah, I'm not, and I've seen those Lethal Weapon movies and I hated them. But But one incredible thing that he did was he co-created the Adventures of Briscoe County. I believe he co-created it with Sam Raimi and Tapper, and starred Bruce Campbell. Have you ever seen that? The cable show with it takes place in the Old West, but it has like a science fiction time travel angle to it.
No,
It only
oh,
lasted one
that's cool.
season. It's got a big following. The Adventures of Briscoe County. Um, yeah, and so that's kind of a rundown of some of the people in the movie. And like I said, Michael Mann, the connection there is, obviously he said this is one of his favorite films, and I've kind of enumerated obviously how it influenced him. So that's what I've got on Straight Time. Do you have your thoughts? I would like to hear them if you have any more.
Oh, I just love Dustin Hoffman, and I love Gary Busey, and I love Kathy Bates. I
Mhm.
love the actors in the movie,
Yeah.
and I really believe what you're saying, that Dustin Hoffman really kind of got into his character. He was very introverted, kind of. You could see he was tortured. I loved the kind of look on his face. Do you know what I mean? Throughout the movie, I I think he did a great job there. Now,
He's holding
myself,
a lot of
so
rage back. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
and he doesn't
yeah.
want to kill anybody. I mean, I got the impression that Willie was the first human he'd ever murdered.
Mm.
So it's just one of those tragedies, and
Yeah.
the
He was too traumatized. Traumatized. I think it does like show you about how institutions traumatize you. You know what I mean?
mhm.
Um, like because they're you're supposed to go to prison or whatever to be reformed or whatever, and like homeless people go to homeless shelters to find a place, but they often find themselves in trouble in these institutions or whatever. That they're more dangerous sometimes than they should be. More safe places. They should be
Right,
safe places, but they're often quite dangerous and
because
they
society
don't help
marginalizes
people.
them.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up this episode of Deep Images, and we'll be back soon. We have something we'd like to impart to you before we leave. And
We really appreciate you listening. We love your participation. We want to see your comments. We love when people get into what we're talking about. And so like, subscribe, and share to your friends who you feel like will enjoy it as much as we do. So, thank you.
right on. Thank you. Have a good evening.
And it's true that we cannot see that far behind. If we looked all the way in the past, we'd go blind. In the night, from the stars as they've all lived their lives, and the light that they gave as they burned and then died.